Hello and welcome again to another All Nation Line video. Wanted to follow up on our Whopper Hopper car for the Atlantic coastline, and this time we're going to discuss the steps. If you've ever looked at the photographs for that particular prototype car, those steps are a little different than your average freight car steps. So we went about developing these for our own reference model, and I wanted to do something for the brass model that I'm building for my own layout. So the first thing I tried to do, of course, was come up with something besides a jig. I started out with some pins and bending brass and decided that it was better to develop a little jig here in the CAD program. So what I did was to develop the brass strips that I needed to create my steps, and what I like to do is cut these to about a 1/16 of an inch width, and then I'll stack these, solder them, and then drill the holes. So this makes it a little easier to start because we're going to go ahead and mount this particular jig like so on here, because I don't have three hands, and it's very handy to be able to hold things in place while you give it a little touch of solder. So we would take and put our first strip in the slot, and actually what I would probably do is cut this a little short and trim it up after it's all done soldered up. And I typically like to use the old American Beauty soldering iron. I can generally solder without melting my plastic on my jig, or I can alternatively use my resistance soldering and touch the joints where I need to make a weld. So as you can see, I would start laying these strips in here, and again, on here I touch the solder into the corner, but I know that before I do that, I probably want to make this diagonal bend here and form this leg of the step, because there's actually two steps with a divider strip in here. And so we would just take this one step at a time. So I'm going to lay this first piece of brass in this slot here, and I want it flush on this top, because even if we run a little long on these, we'll trim those once it comes out of the jig. But in this case, I'm going to take this off, and we're going to shorten this up a little bit. Makes it a little easier to work with. Okay, so there we go. I trimmed that a little shorter, laid it in the groove, and now I'm going to take and I'm going to form the diagonal on this one and lay it in there, and I will make it a little long. The only tools you'll really need for this project, besides your soldering iron or your resistance soldering, is a couple of pairs of long nose pliers to do your bends on your parts. So as you can see, I made a little diagonal bend in this wire. Now I'm going to trim it a little bit on the long side. Okay, those two pieces are laid in there pretty snug, and I'm going to put a little touch of solder on this first joint and help stabilize it. So rather than using solder paste, I generally like to use some of the stuff the plumbers use. It's clear liquid. Put it on there, and helps the solder flow. So we're going to take this soldering iron here, and we're going to just touch this first joint and hopefully not melt my jig. Always a challenge. And by the way, what I'm using is some electronic solder. It's a 6040 0.03 1 diameter, and it works very nice on some of these joints. It melts quickly, and it seems to do the job pretty good. You can take that tiny end and put it right in the corner there and give it a little quick shot, and there you go. So the next thing on this project, what we want to do is we want to cut the piece for this middle vertical part of the step before we put in these other horizontal pieces. And for this particular step, what you need to do, and remember that there's a right and a left hand step. I generally like to give this a little bend on the end because it's going to go under this one here, like so. And if we need to trim it later, we can, but the first thing I want to do, since this flat isn't going to sit in there, this needs a twist. So what I will probably do is take, so the next step here is to use a secondary clamp just to hold this tail piece down while we work on this middle section. And what I've done is I cut a short piece and put a bend because this is going to go up under here and be soldered like so. But before we do that, we want to put a little twist on this guy, and in order to do that you need 2 pliers, and it's something that I generally like to eyeball, so I'll turn it on its side to get a little more accurate and put my little nose pliers in the space there, grab it like that. I'm going to take my other pliers and give it a twist like so. And in so doing, I know that there's going to probably be a little different profile on this for the left and the right. So when I go ahead and do the opposite step, I'm going to tack it in this direction. But for this one, we're going to stick it in here. Hopefully, I probably got to loosen up the clamp. Yeah, loosen up the clamp a little bit. Get this guy in here like this and get it in the slot. And that's why we have this other clamp here, because we want to keep it all steady while we give it a touch of solder. So that's my third hand. You can see it's in here. It's about where I want. And I'm going to put a little juice on it. And we're going to get that guy tied down with a little touch of solder as well. And hopefully we won't bump the camera and we won't melt the jig. So I'm going to put a little solder on the tip. I'm going to keep this close by. And there. It's that easy. So the next thing we're going to do, we're going to leave this long, but we're going to fit in our pieces on the upper or secondary step. So as not to make this video too long and boring everybody, I did cut this piece and solder it in to speed this up a little bit. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to trim this here, we're going to trim this and drill some holes and put the twist on all 3 of these. As you can see here, we did trim these up a little bit. I'll make this one here in the middle a little shorter once I have it out of the jig. So as you can see, I put the twist on them. The next thing I want to do is take it over to the little drill press and cut 4 holes, 2 in this one and 2 in this one. The right hand stirrup here might get shortened a little bit or trimmed diagonally. We're going to hold it up to the car and compare it to the photograph of the prototype to get a closer fit. So that concludes this little demonstration of creating these steps. We will trim this piece here and round this corner a little bit.